Hi, it's Michael Kerr here, presenting Small Business Banter. A healthy micro and small business sector means a successful economy and a more vibrant society. Small Business Banter is about helping regional business owners better prepare for current challenges, but also for the next stage of business success. I'm Michael Kerr, founder of Kerr Capital, advisors to business owners. Each week, I interview a fellow small business owner or an expert, and they share their stories, their lived experiences, the wins and the losses, and their best advice to help you, the listener, get the most you can from your own business. Small Business Banter is brought to you from the studios of 104.7 Gippsland FM and is heard across Australia on the Community Radio Network. And thanks also to Kerr Capital, supporters of the show. So welcome into another edition of Small Business Banter Community Radio and Podcast. I'm sitting in Queenscliff today face-to-face with Andy Gowers. Welcome in, Andy.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be here.
Andy is a succession planning expert. We're going to talk a lot about succession planning, exit planning for private and family businesses through two episodes of Small Business Banter. So Andy's got an extensive background in succession planning, wealth management, and also 12-odd years playing elite football, including a premiership at Hawthorn in 1991. So, Andy, do you just want to give us a little bit about yourself before we get stuck into talking about the importance of succession planning?
Sure, no worries, Mike. Yeah, so I did, as you touched on, I did have a 12-year AFL career, and it was actually a friend of mine who suggested I get into wealth management at the end of that time. He was working for the Financial Planning Association, and he'd had a window into that world and figured that my skill set and interests would work well in that profession. I already had a business marketing degree and had no idea what I wanted to do after my footy career finished. So he knew this, and he was the one who sort of suggested that this would be a good thing for me to explore, which I did, and I ended up agreeing with his assessment. Did a financial planning diploma via correspondence, and it was a little bit tricky because at the time when literally a few days after I enrolled, our coach, Lee Matthews, had said he was going to structure training in a way that we couldn't do anything else because he wanted us to focus on footy only. Anyway, I found a way to squirrel enough time in to get that done. But yeah, worked my way through a series of involvements in the wealth management area, including a couple of years with ANZ Bank during the GFC, which was very interesting and very. It was actually a really important time to learn about the psychology of investing when everything was seemingly going to the you-know-what. So that was a really interesting experience, and then started up my own wealth management business with a partner who I'd met at ANZ, who was the technical one, and I was the business developer, the generator of the business.
From what I know you reasonably well, and you're very much a people person, and I can imagine that was front and centre for you, and creating good outcomes for people.
Yeah,
and bringing in the technical and the financial stuff, but relationships are very strong in your way of doing business.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Well, yeah, absolutely. So what ended up happening was I had a lot of friends and friends of friends who became clients, and a few family members as well. So it was important to me to do a good job for them.
Yeah. There's a lot resting on it.
Yeah, exactly right. So I wanted to protect those relationships and, in fact, enhance them. And so we did that for about 11 years, and that that worked really well, sold the business. And even if I go back a bit of a step too, during that time, I really, really warmed and was invested in the discussions I'd have with business owners and families when it came to succession. And I did a lot of presenting at conferences and so on the topic, as you know. And as much as I knew that the financial planning discussion was really important to get the management of people's wealth right, I also felt like there was perhaps a bigger picture to be drawn and played out, and that was the succession bit. Because ultimately, what I'd seen and experienced was wealth sometimes does drag people away from what's important.
Yeah.
And, families not dealing with each other in the way that, they should be really, and having a happy family because of some wealth issues, to me, is very sad. And if I could play a role in helping that not happen, then that's been a real motivator for me.
So that's very corrosive, and we see that played out in and succession planning gets a lot of coverage in the press, but it's always about these mega uber wealthy families. It must be a tough environment to grow up in. Very privileged, but very tough.
Very tough.
So you could see through this, and money, wealth managed well, businesses managed well, create great opportunities. But you want to stop the families going off the rails, just purely out of financial greed, perhaps, or misunderstanding, or whatever.
Well, sometimes just a lack of communication.
Right.
Assumptions get made that may or may not be right. You mentioned the word entitlement. You have family members have their own relationships, so they get married themselves. I'm talking about siblings here of parents. So there's another dynamic, and then they have their own children, and then there's another dynamic. Some are in favour of different schooling methods, different costs. Even things as simple as different cars. John has a Mercedes, and Jill has a Commodore.
Yeah.
Just different approaches to life and different attitudes and so on, and resentment can build. And if these things aren't resolved, if these things aren't communicated, as trivial as some of them might sound, they can lead to all sorts of problems down the track. Yeah,
they sure do. And communication is at the core of that. And the tension builds when the communication's not happening. But for someone to facilitate and initiate that communication, I imagine that's a big part of your role. You can see it from everybody's angle.
Yes.
And you can see the potential for really bad outcomes.
Yep.
And is that a core part of being a good? I mean, we're going to talk about in the second part of this interview the mechanics of succession or exit planning.
Yes.
But is that becoming the advisor to the family is or the business owners, whoever it is crucial to kind of be able to lock yourself in as the one that can facilitate all that communication and some of those challenging conversations.
Yes, I think so. I think it's really helpful to have an independent expert to guide you through the process, and maybe to consider some of the things that are or are not fair. It's if you look at the family as the entity, if you like, that needs to be protected, and then you look at the individuals that comprise that family, there may be there often is certain sacrifices that people have to make for the benefit of the family structure and keeping things as close to together as you can. The thing you want to avoid is the old nuclear button where a sibling or a family member says, well, bugger you, I don't care about the rest of you, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And goes off the reservation, as it were.
Yeah.
You, as much as you can, if you can keep the lines of communication open, someone I'm just about to formally go into business with has a great expression, which is you need honesty, but you need sensitive honesty. You can't have brutal honesty because brutal honesty risks someone hitting that button.
Yeah. Oh, it's such an emotion-charged time. I mean, starting a business, creating a vibrant, healthy, successful business. You bring in a whole lot of complications. One of them, which we'll get to talk about, is, and you mentioned psychology, the outgoing. I mean, there's succession from one party to another, and the outgoing owner or founder is often challenged by a whole lot of things other than just finance. It comes down to purpose.
Definitely.
What am I going to do? So,
yeah.
We will get to that. Do you want to just, for the minute, just define what succession planning is and talk about how big the issue or the industry is?
Sure. Well, I mean, quite simply, succession is about handing over or passing on an asset to either the next generation in a family situation or the next owners in a business situation. So that may or may not include your own family members.
So the succession kind of more typically sits within a family environment and an exit plan.
Yes.
With an external, is that a?
Well, yeah, it can. I mean, the ultimate example of succession is in terms of families is a royal family, and that's pretty much set in stone. What's going to happen there?
Yeah.
But for people who aren't bought into royalty, they're not surrounded automatically by people who are there to guide them in these matters. And we see it with farming families. We see it with people in the big smoke. We see it with a whole range of situations where there are assets to be distributed, to be handed down, to be handed over. There are a lot of questions, and there are a lot of we don't always have the answers, but it's a matter of working through. Well, what's at play here? How many people are involved? What's fair? What's right? What's expected? What's been promised? What's owed?
What's unwritten?
What's unwritten, and a lot of it is unwritten. So documenting these things is part of the process that I know we'll get to.
Yeah.
But that's really at the end of a long process. Well, it doesn't have to be long, but that's at the end of an important process to get to where it becomes clear or clearer what should happen. And as I said before, the family unit or the business entity, if that's sacrosanct, and then the individuals that are associated or attached to either the family and or the business, and sometimes it's both, then they happen as a matter of course. And then you work your way through to what should be a logical conclusion.
Yeah, as you say, I'm tempted to jump in and talk about the process, but I think we need to, just hold off on that for a bit. So, in terms of how many businesses in Australia, at least, are we talking about that you think could do with quality succession planning? And you've been in the industry already. You've exited a business involved in starting another one.
Yep. Look, a lot more than are doing it. Is the short answer. And look, some may be doing it really well on their own, and hats off to them if they are. I think it's always a good process to have a bit of a pulse check and see how you're sitting succession-wise. Simple things like, is your shareholders agreement up to date? Have you had a discussion with your business partner, if you've got one? Some people are sole traders and what have you, but for those people listening that have a business partner or more, have you had the discussion about what the different exits are? And in a previous life, that's something that we did a lot of. We talk about insurable exits. So if someone unfortunately passed away or couldn't work due to a really critical illness, you can insure those events and replace the cost of that person's equity via an insurance policy. And then there are uninsurable events. So someone's just had enough, or someone wants to sell and the others don't. And not always are you going to be on the same page.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a tendency when you're going into business to focus on or start a business solo or with a partner that everything's going to be great, and it's really it's the best time to actually contemplate those challenging questions, but it's also the easiest to pass over and say, look, everything's going to be fine.
We'll do it later.
Yeah. We might come back to that also, but on today's Small Business Banter, chatting with Andy Gowers, and Andy gave a pretty reasonable overview. When are you ready to talk about the new entity in terms of, is that still
it's still a work in progress?
Yeah,
well,
okay.
it's under wraps in as much as we haven't decided yet on our name.
Yeah.
But it will be a succession planning business for families and businesses.
Yeah.
Just one, I suppose, one interesting anecdote with that business is my partner is a fellow by the name of David Naphtali, who's a lawyer, qualified lawyer, and has recently been involved in a business over in Hong Kong and has moved back to Australia and was looking at his next business move. But I met him via his father, who I met on LinkedIn. And what had happened was, I think you may even know this story, but I saw a great article on succession planning in the Fin Review, and Michael Naphtali, David's father, was quoted, and he was the one who used the term sensitively honest. You have to be sensitively honest, not brutally, which I really thought was fantastic. And I contacted him and said how much I enjoyed what he said in the article, and I'd love to have a coffee with him one day and talk succession. And here we are now. We're going to business together.
It's amazing the power of reaching out to people when you can read things and listen to things, but you take that next step and just put it out there, because that's how these things can end up. It doesn't always end up, obviously, but that's a nice way to to parlay into a new business based on a genuine interest in something they've said and the shared interest in what you're going to do. So again, in terms of scene setting, what are some of the really positive outcomes you've seen from good succession planning, and also some negative ones? I mean, we want to, from every measure and I'm actively involved in advising owners, as you have been for a long time, and the numbers vary, the stats vary, but there's a lot of business owners and family businesses that just haven't got to it yet. So to perhaps kind of make it a bit more compelling, can you post a view of some good outcomes and some bad outcomes?
Sure. Well, I think the best outcome, Mike, is a family that still gets along together.
That has a barbie together.
That's right.
Can chat.
Yeah. When Christmas comes around, there's a real sense of excitement about all getting together and sharing a meal together and enjoying a great day, or whatever day it is for the family, a birthday or what have you, because they've addressed the succession issue. Everybody understands what's happening or what will happen. And, you can map out certain events and say, well, if this happens, this is how we'll handle it, and so on. The what-ifs have been at least pondered, and maybe they haven't got a completely black and white answer for every single question, but at least they are dealing with it, as you said.
They're known unknowns. They've moved from unknown unknowns.
That's right. Yeah, and I mean, our brains are wired to think about the what-ifs, and in a family situation, it is complex. Every family has its challenges. Leave a business out of it for a second. Just getting along as a family is a challenge in itself. So you throw into the mix assets and maybe a business that's, that might be fairly lucrative, or even if it's not, just a business.
Yeah.
And it's another factor in the equation. So what does that business mean for me? What does it mean for my husband or my wife or my kids or my grandkids? What does it mean? What does it mean for mum and dad? What does it mean for our employees? What does it mean for our suppliers? What does it mean for our customers? And there's just such a big community around every business. But again, just parking the business to one side for a moment, just a family getting along. I reckon that's the best outcome. And, you know, that Fin Review article I was referring to before, that had some very high-profile examples of where families deal with each other via lawyers and where siblings do not communicate at all. Now, to me, that's tragic. That's shocking.
Yeah, somewhere along the line it went off the rails, and somewhere just before that there was potentially, with a bit of open-minded approach and some guidance, an opportunity to steer it in a different direction.
Yeah.
It's terrible to see.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, I look back at, because it has occurred to me, why am I so interested in this area? As a very young boy, I lived within a business, if you like, in Kew, a place called Butley Wootton, which ran events, mainly weddings, parties, anything really. And my father and mum and myself and my younger brother, I've got one sibling who's 3 years younger than me, we moved in very briefly to basically trade that business out of debt and pay off all the staff, and then the business was either sold or handed over. But I remember living in that environment, which was, on reflection, high stress. Yeah. Everybody was stressed.
Yeah.
And
everybody in the family felt that.
Yeah. It reverberated through everything that got said or done. And I remember that it was palpable. Even though a lot of things weren't said, it was probably more the unsaid things that caused the problems, to be honest.
Yeah.
So that was a very, very I just remember the stress, particularly in my father, to a lesser degree my mum, but it was Dad's family that had that business. And, you know, decades later, here I am fascinated in succession planning and helping as many families and businesses as I can address this issue. And it probably isn't surprising that, you know, that might have been the reason.
Yeah, look at
or a reason.
Well, look, it's so formative and almost probably in your DNA, and it certainly predates your LinkedIn profile, but it's far more important because you saw it, and I, you know, there's a lot of business owners that I deal with who, and a lot of people that we come across that aren't natural communicators. What they are is very stoic. They're very committed to doing what it takes. But it does have a cost, and it's really easy to sit here and say, you know, they should get some advice, but it's the reality is for a lot of individuals that, you know, that's the way they're wired. So it does take a very special individual or a trusted advisor to kind of build that relationship so that you are there and you can say in a forthright but honest way, things need to change. It's the same as you referred to those discussions when there's some, you know, when a family does stick together through a business experience. It's a lot of it would be about addressing those challenging questions, as you say. Maybe we don't have all the answers, but at least they're on the table, and you're maturing the values and the culture in the family to talk about things, even if they're hard.
Absolutely. And to actually to raise that's a really good point. To raise what are our family's values and how does that transpose into the business? So one of the questions you asked before was, you know, what are some good elements of succession planning? And I won't name the people, but I know of one very successful succession plan, which is it's not a finite thing. This is an ongoing process. But one of the things that they have done very successfully is they've integrated their children through the various parts of the business. So it hasn't been a case of, well, you know, this person has this position by right, by birth,
by entitlement.
No, this person has actually gone around and worked in every part of the firm, every department. So, you know, maybe gone to uni after school, and then had experience not just working in every department, but getting to know all the people.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. So there's there's mutual respect then, because they've seen this person, work hard, get to know everybody, build relationships, understand every facet that they can of the business. And so then when they do pop up with a management role of some sort, then it's looked upon with celebration, not.
They've to some extent they've earned their stripes, like anybody needs to if you're going to manage a business. And some of the most admired business owners I've come across, they overcommit to the business, but I also admire deeply their approach to it, which is in the office and whatever needs to be done, I will do. And there's some pretty. I've met some fascinating people, and at 70 years and 80 years old, they're still involved, and it's their business. And they, but I did deeply admire the way that they approached it, and I suppose then it leads to in that true succession planning. Not everybody's going to cut it, and so the ability to monitor how family members go in roles, and let them go, let them make mistakes. It'll prove out whether they're owners or not, really, in the long run.
Whether they're up to it.
Andy, what we're going to do is I think we're going to move to. We're definitely going to move to some of the more mechanics of succession planning. We've run out of time for the minute.
Sure.
But I look forward to that next discussion. And for those listening in, you can catch this part 1 and then part 2 on the podcast coming up soon for Small Business Banter. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Mike.
So that is all for today's episode of Small Business Banter. I continue to be inspired bringing you small business experts and other small business owners and hearing their stories. If you want to listen to any past episode, jump onto your podcast platform of choice and search Small Business Banter. There you will find a diverse and fascinating collection of small business owners and experts openly discussing and sharing their experiences. For any of the links, resources, or information we've talked about on the show today, or to contact me, please head over to smallbusinessbanter.com, or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. And it would be great to have you tune in the same time next week for another episode of Small Business Banter.